Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's Inspiring Ideas at Trinity webinar. My name is Michael Malooly, and I am a part of the Alumni Relations team here at Trinity Development and Alumni. This afternoon, we're delighted to welcome two amazing sporting alumni, Ed Joyce, and the head coach for the Ireland women's cricket team, and Linda Jugong, an Ireland and Leinster rugby player. Today's webinar is being co-hosted by Trinity Sport, and it is a pleasure to have Matthew Dossett, Deputy Head of Trinity Sport, with us here today as well. Matthew will facilitate the discussion and Q&A following the main talk, and in just a moment, I will pass the microphone over to him. Before we start, I would like to run through a few technical items with you. For those of you who are joining us on Zoom today, you can view it full screen by clicking on the button in the top right corner of your screen, and you can adjust the audio settings by clicking on the bottom left-hand corner. You can leave the session at any time by clicking on the bottom right. We encourage you as well throughout this presentation to ask any questions that occur to you. The Q&A button is available at the bottom of your screen. Our speakers will respond to these questions later on in the webinar. For those of you who are viewing on YouTube Live, thank you for tuning in today. If you need to mute or unmute the video, you can do so by using the small speaker button circled here in red. And to share the webinar, which we encourage you to do, you can click on the share link on the right. To subscribe to our YouTube channel, click the red button. We love to hear from you there as well, so please do share your thoughts and questions in the comment box, and these will be passed along to our speakers. Our talk today will last for around 40 minutes, followed by about 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A. So it should take just under an hour, and we plan to wrap things up by around 2 p.m. Irish time. This webinar is being recorded for later viewing. If you are watching on Zoom, you will get a link to the recording shortly afterwards. The recording will also be made available to view on the TCD Alumni YouTube channel. And now a brief introduction on both of our speakers today. Ed Joyce is a former Irish cricketer who has played for both the Ireland and English national cricket teams. After beginning his career with Middlesex, he moved to Sussex in 2009 before returning to Ireland to play for Leinster Lightning in the Irish Interprovincial Championship. A left-handed batsman, Joyce is widely regarded as one of the best cricketers ever produced by Ireland. Ed is currently the head coach of the Cricket Ireland women's team. And as for Linda, an Ireland and Leinster rugby star, Linda Jugong came to Ireland from Cameroon when she was just 9 years old. Arriving in Ireland with no English and French as her primary language, Jugong went on to represent Leinster and Ireland in rugby. Linda is a recent graduate from the Trinity School of Nursing, and as a student nurse, she has been working on the front line throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, caring for the nation's most vulnerable patients at Tallaght University Hospital. And now it is my pleasure to hand you over to my colleague and this afternoon's host, Matthew Dossett from Trinity Sport.
Thank you, Michael. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be hosting today's Inspiring Ideas webinar alongside Trinity Development and Alumni. Thank you very much for joining us. It has now been 146 days since we closed the doors to the Sports Centre here on campus, as well as our other facilities and venues due to the COVID-19 outbreak. Despite the world's gyms, pools and pitches being closed, there's been a huge surge in those taking part in physical activity and personal fitness over the past 5 months, with many of us finding new ways to exercise in small spaces and with sometimes unconventional equipment. Today's webinar aims to showcase some of the work that has been going on behind the scenes across the world of sport as we rebuild some of our methods of delivery and also begin reintroducing members, clubs and athletes back to training. We're also going to hear how the global pandemic has impacted the work and lives of two Trinity sporting stars and where they see challenges and opportunities in the road ahead. Within Trinity Sport, though, the past 5 months have absolutely been a difficult period. Many of our clubs have not completed their final league or cup fixtures, and some of the institutions' showcase events, such as rugby and the rowing colours, were cancelled days prior to their scheduled dates. In a university setting, it is this sudden and continued loss of life-changing experiences through sport that many people will have missed. However, whilst it is very sad to have their seasons ended or stop in the way they did, keeping everyone safe is our greatest concern. Recently, though, some of our teams, including soccer and rowing, have continued training return to training and competition under the relevant college and government guidelines. And this has been great to see. Over the next month, other teams and performance athletes will begin using our facilities once more in an adjusted and new way. Our team of over 30 staff within Trinity Sport have been working remotely for the past 5 months. And whilst our facilities have remained closed, the level of work and items that are to be addressed for the future have been constant. We've engaged globally and internationally with European partners, learning valuable lessons and feedback around how others have dealt with reopening their facilities and return to sport in a safe manner, as well as how they've supported their staff and users on this new journey. We're delighted to be beginning to gradually reopen our facilities from the 10th of August, but we are very aware of ensuring that this is safe and a positive experience for all those who train with us. New digital systems and processes will ensure that everyone who works with us can do so in the way they wish, including being able to continue taking part in a huge range of live and on-demand fitness classes in person or at home. Whilst the digital world has been forced on many, ourselves and some of the sport industry providers were already well down the road in terms of providing services remotely. Since the restrictions began, we have further accelerated these processes with our superb team of fitness staff continuing to deliver live streamed and on-demand classes and one-to-one support every day of the week, with thousands of hours of content viewed and participated in since March. This again underlines the huge adjustment many of our staff have had to deal with, including turning their living rooms into fitness spaces and keeping up the quality of support and engagement that we pride ourselves on. Those taking part in sport and physical activity on a regular basis has increased during the pandemic, with Trinity research showing an increase of almost 10% compared to last year. 90% of those who took part in the research also indicated their reason for exercising was to benefit their physical and mental health. And this really underlines how important sport and physical activity is to our overall well-being. One of the challenges to Trinity Sport is now to ensure we keep those who have increased or started new fitness habits engaged and continue to meet the weekly recommended guidelines. Doing things together and working towards a combined goal have both become even more important to society since we've been apart. Our community came together on the 18th of July to complete a variety of team challenges to help raise funds for the charitable trust linked to St Vincent's, Tala and James's hospitals. And it was inspiring to see those new to exercise and accomplished runners joining together and supporting the event. We're delighted so far to have raised just under €10,000, and I'd like to thank all our alumni community who took part from across the world in the event. Sport really has the power to create change and inspire others. Professional and recreational sport looks different at the moment, but its return has been one of the lights that we have all been desiring at the end of the tunnel. We all have a role in continuing to work together to battle the spread of COVID-19, and sport has a role to play in ensuring our mental and physical well-being is looked after. I'm delighted to be joined by two individuals today who've made a significant mark on Irish sport and Trinity. And we're going to be hearing how their lives and sporting roles have been impacted since the COVID era began. Our first speaker is Ed Joyce, Trinity Sport Ambassador, who retired from professional cricket in 2018 after being part of the first ever Ireland men's test match against Pakistan. His playing career spanned over 19 years and saw him compete and captain for Sussex and Middlesex county teams, along with representative honours for England and Ireland in 2020 one-day internationals and test matches. Ed continues to be heavily involved in Ireland, Leinster Provincial and Trinity cricket, and he's currently the head coach of the Ireland women's team. Ed is going to speak about his experiences over the past 5 months and also takes some of your questions later on. So welcome, Ed, and I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Matthew. Obviously, big smile on my face after the game yesterday. Obviously, Ireland beating England in a men's ODI, which was great to see. Yeah, I guess unlike Linda, I'm probably going to come from things from a coaching perspective. I'll start with what we had coming up if COVID hadn't come, so pre-COVID. So what we had in the schedule was working towards a World Cup qualifiers, which would have happened in July, July just gone. So we're working all winter with the players who are based domestically and lots of the girls who go abroad and play in Australia and New Zealand. working with those players in terms of qualifying or sort of competing at that World Cup qualifiers, which the World Cup is in 2021 in New Zealand. So that was our focus. So we had a tournament in Thailand in April, which we were preparing for, which would have been good preparation in turn for the qualifiers. And we also had a tri-series in June scheduled as well. So so we had a lot of stuff coming up, and that was all in January and February, all preparing for that. And then obviously COVID arrived, so plans had to change. I guess our focus shifted to other things. What could we achieve remotely, not being able to see each other, not being able to train outside, and obviously not playing any games for the foreseeable future. So what we decided to do, like lots of other teams and lots of other people, is do a bit of forward planning. Take stock of where we were. I only started the job last June, so June of 2019. So I felt it was a good opportunity actually to put my stamp on things with this team, and hopefully when we got out of lockdown, that we were actually in a better place than when we started it. So like most of the rest of the world, we decided to use Zoom for that. We went probably 3 or 4 different directions. One was doing a team values set of sessions with the group of players. We have a very young group of players. A lot of our senior players retired in the last year or two, so it was an important thing to do, and we really didn't have an opportunity to do that time-wise with the way a lot of the girls are in school or university or abroad, so it was very difficult to do that. But this gave us an opportunity to do it with Anne-Marie Kennedy, who's also the Dublin GAA sports psych. She's our sports psychologist. She's fantastic, and she took it on to set that up. So we had 3 or 4 Zoom calls and lots of questionnaires, and we've come up with, over a couple of months period, a set of team values that we're happy with, that this group can move forward with, and gave us a good focus when we did come out of lockdown. So that was probably the first bit of it. The second bit was an analysis part. We've an analyst called Jay Shalat, who has a lot of videos, and he has information about all the teams we would play in those qualifiers. And so we chose five teams that we could analyze remotely again. So they were West Indies, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. So we chose those 5 teams, and every 2 weeks we would analyze with both the performance squad, which is mainly the players who we would select for Ireland, and we would select from that group, and the academy as well, which is a much younger group. There's 28 players there who would have taken part in analysis, which possibly a lot of those girls wouldn't have done before. So again, a great opportunity for us to get some learning into very young people who mightn't have done that before. So I thought that was very, very useful, and we came up with some good learnings as well. It was great for me as well to actually see a lot of the teams who I hadn't actually seen before, and so it was very useful both for the management group and for the playing group. We also did 2 master classes. We did a batting master class and a bowling master class. The batting master class was with Meg Lanning, who's the world's best female batter. So she very kindly agreed to come on and talk to the players about we picked a specific innings which we got video footage for. She talked her way through it, why she made decisions she did, why she did things at certain times, how nervous she was, how she prepares, what her routines are. And that was supplemented brilliantly by my sister Isabel Joyce, who did the same thing from an Irish perspective. And that was great for the girls to see someone who Meg looks up to Isabel, and looking up to an Irish sports person was fantastic for our young players to see as well. So Isabel and Meg did the batting, and that went really well. And then we had a bowling masterclass with Anya Shubsall, who's been an England seamer for a very long time. She's in the top 5 in the world for the last 10 years, and she was fantastic as well. Agreed to come on and did the same thing. We chose England won the World Cup, the last 50 over World Cup in England, and she was the woman of the match in the final, and she performed really well. We had that video, and she went through it in exactly the same way as Meg and Isabel went through theirs. So they were very useful again. And as I said, in lockdown, you can get a bit boring over Zoom, but having something different like those master classes really made a difference, and they broke up the other sessions really nicely. So that was great. And the last thing that we did was, again, like lots of other people using Zoom, was a fitness element to it. We have a new strength and conditioning coach called Greg Collins, who comes from England and has good knowledge of the England women's team, who are obviously one of the best teams in the world. And he came in and gave us an idea about what he wanted to work on based on what he knew about what the England girls were working on. So there was a bit of copying going on there, and we got great information about how to build power, especially for again very, very young athletes just coming into the game. So we did a weekly Zoom fitness class based on the information that he had already given to the girls. So that worked really well as well. We would have loved to have done more than one, but I think would have been a bit of Zoom fatigue if we'd done that, because we were already doing 2 or 3 sessions on top of that. So that's been great. So since we've actually come back, I feel like the team has a real focus. They're almost a bit more together since lockdown. I think we're going in a direction which possibly we wouldn't have gone in if it hadn't happened. So in a very, very strange way, COVID actually has helped the team have a bit of focus and learn a bit more about the game and understand it a bit better. And definitely for me personally has helped me get to know the girls a lot better as well, and what they want. I think that's really important as well. So that would be a sum up of the things we've been working on. I think, what do we have now? It looks like the qualifiers now are going to be pushed back to November. That's still uncertain, obviously, with the travel restrictions we have. But I think it looks like the IPL, which is a men's T20 competition, a huge competition based in India, usually is going to happen in the UAE, which is where the qualifiers are going to happen. So if that goes ahead, I think we've got a good chance of taking part in that. So we have that focus ahead of us, which means we have something to lead up to. So that's it's obviously a great thing to have, because I think one of the things of training and playing domestically, if you don't have actually something to aim for, it's very hard to motivate players. So yes, we have those in November, and hopefully in October we're able to play some preparatory games in preparation for that, obviously. So that's basically where we are. The things to be worried about, I guess, are what will travel look like? Are we able to get abroad? Will crowds be able to come in? How's that going to look going forward, especially if there's no vaccine? So I think there's definitely a lot of uncertainty around things. But as I said, the lockdown period actually had a was a positive thing for this group of players, albeit obviously we would have loved to have been out playing and training at the same time. So that would be how I would describe the last 4 or 5 months.
Thank you, Michael and Matt, for having me here today. I just talked to and Matthew, thank you so much for having me. I'll just talk to my experience of the whole 6 months prior to, as you all know, prior to COVID-19. I was playing the Six Nations, and I was still doing my internship in Tala Hospital. But I've been a student nurse I've been playing rugby, first of all, for the past 5 years, and I'm a student, so I've been doing the both together, and then I just balance the both of them because I just love them too. So we were in the middle of the Six Nation, and it has to be COVID-19 happened, lockdown happened. We went straight into no games. Everything got postponed, and I was back into working as a student internist, which was good. I was in front line with, I was working in a ward, a COVID positive ward. It was definitely more challenging because I don't think anyone knew what COVID-19 was really at that time, but the support in Tala has been amazing. And on the 8th of May, I got tested because I was working with a COVID-19 positive patients, and obviously we're using the PPE and everything. And I got in close contact with someone that tested positive. And on the 8th of May, I tested positive for COVID-19. And I went into the whole isolation, the process. And for me as a player, that was definitely hard. Even before even that, Trinity was so super supportive. When we had the lockdown, I was able to gym at home, continue my program, my gym program. So I got some equipment and set the house. The whole garden was just a gym, which I feel grateful for having Trinity there to give me the equipment. But being mentally as a nurse and as a player, being told that you're tested positive is you start to worry about your future. You do start to question a lot about what's next, so I did the whole isolation, and obviously when I got tested, I was asymptomatic, so I didn't have any symptoms until I started isolating myself, where I started having symptoms. But this time really allowed me to reflect on what had happened, because straight after Six Nations, we're having a summer international, we're going to San Diego, and as a player, something you look forward to. Obviously that was cancelled. So it was difficult to put it into your head, being, am I going to be able to go back and train as I used to? But I was able to do that. And I think with the whole COVID, we as a team, we Zoomed a lot. We did a lot of video analysis because we were after the Six Nations, we were focusing, our main focus the entire year has been the World Cup qualification. So we were able to do all video analysis through Zoom. And as individual, as a player, I think you constantly, what you probably wouldn't have the time to do a training or do your video analysis. I think with the whole COVID, it kind of gave you more of a time to really sit down and do and kind of look into players and that you're inspired to be. So we video analysis, Wales, Scotland, anything that we play and anything that we'll be playing in the World Cup qualifiers. So it was an important time to do that and to really get together really as a team and support each other. And I think the whole COVID, I think it was important because I think we kind of reconnected with each other and with family too. I think I've been away from home for a long time, and the fact that COVID happened and you couldn't travel or anything like that, as a family, we kind of got back together really, because I never really had that time to really sit down and have the conversation. And we were doing gym through Zoom, which was insane. But that was the beauty of it. I think COVID kind of brought a different aspect to different things. As a player and as a daughter and in families really, and I think it's something that we kind of need to look at the positive aspect of it. But now I'm able, I tested straight when I tested positive, and then I do my 2 weeks of isolation, and then I got tested again. I was able to return back to work, but it was definitely challenging. I found it really challenging to really mentally to cope with it. But that's what supports are there for, and they have really helped me I'm training back again, I'm running. So I kind of looking really forward to the next season, what's ahead of us. We got a confirmation that the Six Nations will be played, and so that would be in October to November, and then we have the World Cup qualifier in November to December. So as a player, you have something to look forward to. You have a goal to look forward to. I think for me, definitely when you're working during a pandemic, you question a lot, especially when you're playing too. You're ambitious, you want to be the best in your position, but when something like that happens, you start to question, are you going to be able to do the sport that you love so much? But luckily, following the government guidelines, we're able to go back training again and do what we love. And it's definitely is a positive aspect. So I'm definitely looking forward to be able to just go back and play again. I think we're all dying to, as a team, to go back and finish the Six Nation and qualify, play the qualifier in November, December. So I'm really excited about it. So
that's great. Thanks, Linda. So Linda, I was going to introduce you there, but you, Mike, I couldn't get the camera going, and then you introduced yourself. So thanks, you took the initiative there. Thanks very much, and thanks Ed as well. I think it's very interesting, the talk of Zoom and kind of this new method of delivering training sessions that people have had to adapt to. And I was just thinking back to even 5-10 years ago, before Skype kind of existed. But if you were a player 10-15 years ago, like this just wouldn't have been feasible. Like I remember doing my initial sports science degree back in 2000. We were still using VHS tape to do dartfish video analysis, and it was the one where if you paused it, then the whole picture would be jumping up and down, and you're trying to measure angles of arms and legs and things. It was impossible. So now the digital age has really accelerated our ability to capture things. But I guess something I picked up there from what you were saying there, Ed and Linda, around doing, the actual training sessions via video. Do you think, that's really altered things in terms of the way you go about teaching sessions? And has everybody in your squads kind of, really taken to the video as a bit of an adapting period?
Just from my end, I think the fitness sessions were great. The one thing, as I said, we have a very young squad, and one of the things you want to do, Linda could probably back this up, was when you're starting to do weights programs and stuff like that, you want to make sure you get the technique right. And that was one of the things that we couldn't really do via Zoom, because first of all, the players didn't have the equipment in their houses, and second of all, you can't really see the strength and conditioning coach can't check 20 players technique really from Zoom. So that was quite tricky, but we basically tried to make it not body weight stuff that you couldn't really hurt yourself or go wrong with. So it worked pretty well, actually. I mean, that was once a week for a good 12 to 14 weeks. So got some decent work in there. But again, once a week isn't really enough either. So you really want to be going to do 2-3 sessions a week, so you're not getting the DOMs and stuff like that. So as I said, they were useful. It's just when we come back into the gym, we can now use the gym in the institute, that the players have an idea of what Greg was trying to do and wanted to do, and they had done some basic bodyweight stuff to prepare them for using bars and stuff like that.
What about you, Linda?
Yeah, we weren't. I think we had the COVID-19 program, and that was just based on we were doing challenge together and really non-weight. Like Ed mentioned, our techniques. There's some stuff you still need to have somebody with you to monitor how you're doing it. So just for the injuries, really, and the fact that we're in lockdown, I don't know if you get any injury, that would be challenging. To get someone to look after you and everything like that. So I think we try to just avoid that. And we just brought together, just have us as a team and just challenge it together. Just fitness, it was more fitness, so more kind of conditioning, cardio, to just not lose this sight of fitness or go behind of what is expected. So as a player, you know what is expected, and you become very straight off because you're not constantly in the environment that you're used to. You start to look extra care of, you start to take extra care of yourself and your fitness. So that was our main important of our goal, is just to stay fit and to bond together too and adjust to the whole circumstances.
Maybe there was an additional role for somebody on the Zoom calls to be managing the banter, which I no doubt was there on both sides. Just a note for everybody who's joined the webinar today. If you do want to ask Linda or Ed a question, if you wouldn't mind submitting it on the Q&A button just at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get through those in a moment. Linda, I was just going to ask as well. Obviously, when around the restrictions started to be put in place in Europe, obviously the Six Nations was midway through being.
Yeah.
And you guys had been over in Twickenham playing the game against England, and I do recall that was around the time there was starting to be a bit more community and media interest around whether these games should be going ahead. Mm-hmm. How did that leave you guys in the team and yourself feeling around traveling over to play the match?
Yeah, we were very, very cautious, and obviously we have doctors and we were well educated about what was going to happen. So we started being really, everyone would have a hand sanitizers. But it was important for us to really look after each other, and even for the management to look after us as players. We started being very restricted on what we can do and what we cannot do. And obviously it came to a decision that it wasn't right for us to go on and play Italy, or so everything was kind of postponed, and we were able to go home and stay away from really the whole, just go home and just the whole lockdown happened. So but which was unfortunate because the whole Six Nations was postponed. But that is something even that gave you another aspect, is something to look forward to. And I think it was the right thing that we listened to the government guidelines and canceled everything for our safety and for the safety of other players too.
Yeah, and Ed, obviously, games of cricket have already started back up, and many other sports have started competitively again internationally. How do you see the piece around games being played behind closed doors, if you like, without crowds? This was a question from the Q&A from Siobhan.
It's not ideal. I think we're just watching even the game yesterday, the three ODIs Ireland have played against England, and just from a cricket perspective, obviously watching Premier League football as well with no sound in the stadium. It's it's novel for about half an hour. I think it's quite good. It's interesting hearing the players shouting and talking to each other, and how much communication there is there from the sideline as well. That was really interesting. But I think you then sort of do miss the atmosphere that is brought, and I think going forward, obviously long term, financially for a lot of the clubs, I don't see how it can possibly work. So whether we live with the virus or a vaccine comes along, it's hard to see how that's going to be maintained for a very long period. But it's not ideal. It's not ideal for the players for sure. look at yesterday, Paul Sterling and Andy Balbirnie get brilliant hundreds in a walk off, and there's no one there, and that should be one of the crowning achievements of their careers, you know. So, and they don't get to celebrate that really, you know. And then from a spectator's point of view, the whole point of professional sport is that people come and watch, you know, really. So, so that element is gone from it, which is the most important bit. So, you know, the future of professional sport is pretty uncertain, really. You know, if you're only allowing a certain number of people into the grounds, then you really can only generate a certain amount of income, and that's king, you know. So I really don't know what's going to happen. No one does, and I think that's what's made it so uncertain about things. But it is great to see sport back. I think sports come back reasonably safely, you know, touching wood, and if that continues, then, you know, people will be a bit more bullish about potentially, you know, a small crowd coming in, maybe a slightly bigger crowd and that kind of stuff. And once people get used to wearing masks and, you know, the social etiquette involved in everyday life, then, you know, who knows, we might get back to some sort of normality soon.
Yeah, it's been very interesting to see games being played, you know, behind closed doors, and some of the different sports having a kind of different approach to how they were including fans. And it really depends on, particularly with the broadcasters, how they're choosing to add in if there's fan noise in the background. But as you say, there's very little impact for the players because they can't hear all of these things that are going on. You know, Linda, for you as well, obviously you played, you were across in Twickenham in December, playing against Harlequins with Leinster. You know, for the fan engagement and spectator engagement to you, you know, how much do you see and hear the noises around you when you're playing a game, and how much do you think that's going to impact when you guys are back in the Six Nations, hopefully?
I think supporter, like I say, that's a massive thing. As a player, you just get that another like oomph to when you have your supporter, you can hear your fans and everyone that have come, your family supporting, and even in your last minute when you're just really tired, and just having that supporter be there with you. I think it just gives you that extra energy, really. So it's going to be very different, very different. But mentally, we just had to prepare for it, and we just need to focus on what we're there for and play. But the atmosphere is something that I don't think you can really replace. Is you need to, even when you're exhausted, when you're looking across and see someone waving that flag, and that just give you another aspect to your game. So I think it's going to be very challenging, but mentally we need to focus and go on about what we're there for.
I think,
and that should be the main thing.
Yeah, sportsmen and women are performers, you know, so they're out there, and a lot of the energy they get from being in front of people is that performance element, you know. So if that's not there, the product, what's being done, is definitely not the same, you know. So to go back to it's a little bit more listless than it possibly would be with a big crowd in there, you know. And some sports people are, you know, do lift themselves with any kind of crowd, you know, and I think some players, talking to some of the players, you know, and some of the Ireland lads and some of the England players as well, spoken about that there is a like 10% lack of motivation there, even though they're representing their country. It doesn't feel the same as it did before. So, you know, it's an interesting take on it as well. And, you know, it'll be a real shock when the crowds do come back.
I think that interaction in rugby and cricket with the fans, you know, in the stadiums and the grounds has always been important. I guess for the cricket as well this weekend, there was no Barmy Army there to be cheering in England and giving Ireland a hard time. You know, these things do have a big impact on the games as well.
It takes away the home advantage, really does, you know, because it was a bit of a study done on, I think, Premier League football again, and home advantage had sort of not disappeared, but it was significantly reduced by the fact that there were no fans in the ground, and obviously a huge proportion would be home fans. So, and you know, that possibly made it easier for the Ireland cricket lads to do well against England last week.
Sure. A question here from Ruby Morrow, I guess to both of you. Do you think people will be anxious about going back to team sports?
Well, I certainly look forward to. I think as a player is what you do. I am really looking forward to getting back into a rugby pitch, wearing that green blue jersey again. So, and I think as a team we have worked so much harder on like video analysis and what we can do, our strength and weaknesses, and how we'll be able to really put it on the pitch. That we just need to go out on the pitch and really show and practice those skills. And just I think as a player, it's definitely lockdown hasn't been easy because you're so routine into you have your day is just full of training or so, and once that's been taken away, you just feel there's something missing. So it will be good to get back into your normal routine.
Yeah, from my end, the girls have come back and started playing club cricket, and we have a super series, which is the sort of 28 best players are made into two teams, and they play each other over the next 7 or 8 weeks. And they're very glad we played the first game last Monday, and you know, it was great to be back playing. I guess, you know, from Linda's side, rugby is a different kettle of fish to maybe a lot of other sports because of the nature of it. You've got tackling, you've got scrums, and you've got lots and lots of really close contact. So, you know, whereas in cricket you can distance a little bit, you know, there's obviously elements of you know, sweat and stuff on the ball and sharing that around, and so it's how safely things can be done. Obviously it has to be done safely, but the players themselves and the coaches and management and stuff are desperate to get back playing. It's just which, you know, different sports have different protocols, and they're going to have to deal with those in different ways.
I think the restrictions, you know, globally, it's really underlined how innovative and how good at problem solving sporting organizations and bodies and leagues are. I'm not sure if you've seen any of the clips around the NBA basketball bubble that they've created in Disney World in the States around protecting the players, and the protocols and systems they have in place is unbelievable. Now, you know, this is a huge financial machine that they have in place to be able to run those leagues, and I guess that makes it much more challenging for other structures and you know, smaller organizations and bodies to try and replicate those systems. And one of the things you mentioned earlier, Ed, around, you know, the financial strain around hosting matches and not having fans there, I think is a very important point. And you know, I think recently there's, with certain sports, you know, returning to competition, I noted there's some comments around you know, the impact around that's going to have if they're moving towards what are seen as the more commercially viable competitions, which tend to be the men's competitions, which is not right. But I was just wondering your thoughts, both of you, in terms of your roles, what your thoughts are, where those budget cuts have to be made by organisations, if they're then looking to things around the women's programs and other inclusion programs. How does that leave the programs that you're involved in?
It's definitely tough. Just an example of what you're saying there about adding a layer of cost to something. The Women's World Cup, which is supposed to be in New Zealand in February, March next year. I heard an estimate of it adding another 6 million, I think it was 6 million New Zealand dollars to the cost of hosting the tournament, to keep all the teams in those bubbles and you know, quarantined or self-isolating and stuff like that, and with all the added bits around it. So that's a huge financial strain. I think now it would be worth it for a World Cup, because World Cups, you know, obviously get sold to obviously TV companies and stuff like that, so you make a lot of money from that. I think that would be worth it. But then you look at a slightly smaller competition, you know, or sort of bilateral games where you're playing hosting and then going somewhere else, like you would have in the Six Nations, I guess. You know, that then becomes a huge extra layer of cost, where, you know, it's just one game and you're going somewhere you have to isolate maybe for a week or two. You know, I don't know how that's going to work, you know. So the competition says World Cups and things that might be a bit easier. Where a cut's going to happen, I think cuts are going to end up, if we stay like this for any length of time, they're going to come all over. I don't think it's going to necessarily come in. In fact, I think in the elements that are spent less on, there might be less cuts than big ones. So, for instance, with Cricket Ireland, we have you have a lot of contracted men and not very many contracted women, which obviously we're trying to change at the moment. It's just the way it is at the moment. As you said, Matt, that there's more money to be made from the men's game at the moment, so that's where the money is invested. But that means they're spending an awful lot more money on men's contracts. And I know if I was in an organization, you'd be cutting the thing that's costing you more. So you'd certainly be cutting it more than the other thing anyway. So it's hard to know, as I said, but I do think at some point it's going to come to that. And you read about Leinster rugby and stuff. Linda would know more about it. You read about the rugby players and stuff like that. Huge growth over the last 15, 20 years. And that's albeit just stopped, so it's just where that goes, and it's hard to know where the cuts are going to be.
What about for you, Linda? The games there for Leinster, for the men's team, I see have been announced. What's happening with the women's team?
From Leinster, I think now we haven't heard anything going back with Ireland and Leinster. So now we're focusing on club rugby at the moment to just get back into the whole routine. And I haven't heard anything yet from Leinster to come. But now we're back into club training and then straight into Ireland, depending if everything goes well with the government guidelines and if we're able to move forward.
Sure. Okay. One of the other questions here from Gordon Curry was, I wonder if the motivation of players for sport has been maintained during the pandemic, or whether there's been some drift of players towards post-sports careers. So I guess, I think I've seen this with some professionals where they were perhaps already considering finishing off their careers, or this being their final season, and the pandemic has almost forced that decision. Have you seen this happening, and what was your thoughts around motivation?
We have an extremely young group, so I'd be really disappointed if any of them decided they were going to retire at this stage. I know if I was in the situation where I was still playing and I was in my 30s and I was thinking about it, I think, I would definitely be considering that. And I understand that. So I'm still being in contact with a lot of county cricketers in England, and, some of whom are of my age or maybe a little bit less. And, they're really thinking about it now, so if they weren't thinking about it before, they're starting to think about it. And if they were starting to think about it, it's, putting plans into action for this winter, because it's all changed there, massively changed. So as I said, just from the girls here, it doesn't affect this particular group as much as maybe it would have maybe 5 years ago when there were a lot of women in their 30s in the team.
What about for you, Linda?
Yeah, I think it does affect, and I think as a player, you do have goals, and having the pandemic there, you do question what's the goal forward and what's your long-term goal. And we seen the Olympic being pushed a year back, so that would affect a lot of people that maybe this Olympic would be the last year to compete. But as a player, you have to adjust to it. It's definitely challenging, and I think this whole COVID has allowed us that time to really think about it. And for me, definitely, I still want to wear that blue jersey or that green jersey. So, and I'm looking enough, but unfortunately for some people, it has made them think a lot about their sport career.
Absolutely. Ed, I saw probably back in March, April time, I believe you were drafted in as a masterclass coach, I think, with your kids. I saw some good videos of some batting practice and skills, and obviously there's been a huge number of these going around on social media from various sports, which is, some of them are amazingly innovative in the things that people have done. One of my kids has been doing karate since this all started at home. But I guess part of the challenge at the moment is, and this actually links into a question from Siobhan around Anybody now for like grassroots sport and people looking to get into sport and perhaps thinking, oh, I really fancy trying out rugby or cricket. How do you think that can still happen, and what challenge is there for the governing bodies in order to maintain that draw of new people coming into the sport?
Well, wins like yesterday for the men's team always help. I think people love a hero, and they love seeing the national team do well. And I think, again, one of the things about COVID is that cricket coming back first and getting an opportunity to play these games has meant that lots of people who mightn't have watched before watch. So that's usually after cricket being a minority sport here, relative minority sport. You would see if Ireland did well in a World Cup or had a big win, you'd see a big spike in the number of kids coming down to clubs and people getting interested in the game. One of the things around COVID at clubs, Marion Craig Club in Donnybrook is my club, and the protocols mean that we have to keep the gate closed, which we absolutely hate because we want the gate to be open so people can just walk in off the street, but we've got to keep the gate closed, and people who are members then have a number to open that gate to get in, and that doesn't encourage people to come down, and get involved. So, I coach my own kids, as you mentioned there, and I coach that group of kids on a Sunday morning, and there's a massive drop off in the numbers, and that's just because it's not because that's interest or anything like that. It's just because people can't get down or don't want to come down or don't know what to do to get down, if that makes any sense. So yeah, there's been a big drop off in numbers for those Sunday morning sessions, which would usually be the introduction to the game. So yeah, that's a challenge, no doubt about it. And if this goes on for years, we're going to have to be much more creative about how to get new members into the game, because it's not as easy when you've got fewer clubs and that it's a relative minority sport here with less people who are necessarily interested in it and bring their kids down anyway, compared to the GAA or rugby or football and stuff like that. So yeah, that's going to be a challenge for sure.
What about you, Linda?
I think it's definitely, I think the whole lockdown has, because we weren't able to go out and do a normal routine, but it's definitely going to be harder because we didn't have the opportunity to go out. And I'm working now with like the whole 2020 to just empower and really motivate young girls into joining sports, even going out for just a walk and just do something, just stay active. And I think it's so important, especially when we've been home for such a long time. And we need to, as an athlete, it's my role to really push the young generation, not push them, but empower them into into getting out there and playing sport. It doesn't have to be any specific sport, anything, cricket, hockey, rugby, football, GAA, just to get out there and just to stay active. And we do need to encourage that even more, especially with the whole lockdown. But I know families and there's a lot of worry across it, but it's so important to stay active, and especially for the younger generation moving forward.
Yeah, it's great to hear, Linda, and I know you take this very seriously around your role as a role model and to be able to inspire other people. And obviously, Ed, you've done this as well, and throughout your playing career, but now as a coach as well, and a parent. Like it's a huge responsibility, and certainly now with the added COVID challenge of trying to deal with different anxieties and different concerns that people have around returning to competition and to training. I guess just one final question before we wrap up. On top of the COVID, this new COVID era for sport, diversity remains one of our biggest challenges. How is this being tackled in your sports? And then maybe we'll start with you, Linda. And what barriers do you think are still present?
I think what has been, I think there's a lot of barriers still need to be broken down in women's sports, and everybody, we know it. I think we need to be promoted more, so those young generation are able to look up to. I especially love growing up. If I had someone, a role model to look up to growing up, I think it's so important for young kids now, and children, to have a role model that they be able, and I'm sure their dad, they'll be able to look up to. And especially for female sports, I think we need to be out there to inspire and empower just young women, girls, to take on this world of sports.
Yeah, from my side, one of the interesting things about the last 10 or 15 years has been, a big influx of people from South Asia, where cricket is a religion almost, and we've seen a huge upturn in the number of men from Pakistan or India or Sri Lanka or Bangladesh playing the game in Dublin and around the country, and it's been one of the big drivers of new clubs in different places where it wasn't played before, which is absolutely fantastic. But we haven't seen that in the women's game, so there's a cultural element to that, and I think that barrier needs to be broken down. I don't necessarily have a solution to it, but just historically, women from those countries haven't played necessarily the game as much as the men have. So it's trying to introduce girls cricket. And I know Cricket Leinster, and again, my sister Isabel, who works for Cricket Leinster, is trying to go around to the clubs like Adamstown and Clondalkin, and these clubs that have a large proportion of immigrants from those countries, and trying to get them to start girls teams and women's teams, and basically saying how to do it, when we play, having lots of information around that. So I think that's one of our big growth areas, is trying to introduce the game to those communities, So and Linda's right, anyone, man, woman, boy, girl needs someone to look up to and someone to aspire to be. And I think we need to get the girls playing more big games in front of bigger crowds on TV, preferably. I guess that's my job, is try and get us to World Cups, and try and get this to World Cups where that's even more heightened, where if you do win a game and someone gets a big 100 or plays really well, they become a superstar, and those superstars then inspire the next generation. So that's what obviously what we're trying to get to. We're trying to grow the game domestically, inspire the next generation of girls to come through and play the game. Absolutely,
that's great. Thanks Ed and Linda. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for today. Thanks to you both for joining us. Hopefully I'll see you both in person soon, and I'll hand back over to Michael.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you again, Linda and Ed, for joining us today and for sharing your experiences and insights. I really enjoyed that. In particular, the discussion between the three of you, I thought was just fantastic. I would like to thank a few people really quickly. First of all, the team here at Trinity Development and Alumni, who've been working hard in the background to ensure that these webinars are all possible. And in particular, I would like to thank Alexandra Owens for her work today. And thanks again to everyone at Trinity Sport, in particular, Michelle Tanner and Gillian Neely, as well as our excellent host, Matthew, for their help co-hosting and organizing this event. And lastly, I'd like to thank all of you who are listening in today and for your engagement and for asking your questions and your comments. We really appreciated having you here today and hope you enjoyed it. If you would like more information on Trinity Sport, you can find them at tcd.ie/sport. You can discover the range of services that they offer there to both students and alumni, and indeed the wider community. And finally, if you have any questions or comments regarding this webinar series, please email us at alumni@tcd.ie. Our next webinar in the Inspiring Ideas at Trinity series will take place on Wednesday, the 19th of August at 1 p.m. Irish time. The webinar is entitled Climate, Cities and COVID-19, Reimagining Urban Life Post-Pandemic, and that will feature guest speakers Marcus Collier, Anna Davies and Lindsay Walsh. The registration link will be sent out by email shortly, so do keep an eye on your inboxes for that. We hope to welcome you there next time, and in the meantime, thank you again once more for joining us. Thank you to our speakers, and have a great day.